2019, I started a log about COVID. Okay. And I started it because I saw what was, I'm very familiar with China, right? With a lot of the operational issues and kind of the people operating system. And I'm pretty familiar with it, both particularly financially and some of the economic issues within it. And so I saw that the protest had completely gained moral authority, that the police could no longer handle it kind of provincially, that it had just kind of the protests that you were seeing in Hong Kong, you're only seeing those because that's where all the media was. There was just as many protests going on, actually a lot more violent going on in the mainland. And after they burned down the university, or after the People's Armed Police in the university, they had lost all type of people background. So then all of a sudden, and there was a lot of triads doing a lot of violent things in service to the People's Armed Police. And so, and then all of a sudden this COVID came around, and there was a way of really channeling up dissent. And how much of the COVID was embellished in order to channel dissent is something I found very interesting. So I started a log at that point, and the log was COVID January, COVID February, COVID March, and now that we're into June, I'm recording what's happening here, and I can kind of see I can watch the water moving downstream, and I don't see any of this exclusive. I see the relationship between the channeling of dissent there and how that dissent expressed itself, which is different than it is here for a lot of different reasons. Are you there?
Yep.
Okay, so dissent expressed, it's a different people operating system. So China is not America over there. It's a much different system. Right. Culturally, legalistically, there's just a whole bunch of different systems. So within their system, right, they can react. If they want to change things, they can change it on a dime. Okay. If I want to change a law, I don't need to get your permission to change a law. It's going to be changing. They changed the Constitution, and they stripped away all the People's Congress powers. They just did a lot of changes that you didn't hear about, but it really substantive changes that just basically stripped away all the political power that people had within the mainland and made their own local provincial government inaccessible to them. So it's very interesting to watch. In our system, we still have the burden of the way I view it. I'm a futurist, right? In our system, we still have the burden of trying to preserve the appearance of continuity, right? We can't have this violent overnight change. People would resist. Everybody would be on the street resisting if they were to say, hey, we're going to change the Constitution in this way. So in our people operating system, we need to be able to still have the appearance of this continuity. That's the way I view it. I mean, this is my own kind of thinking about the thing, but we need to have our own appearance of continuity, this kind of facade that our institutions and everything still exist. So as I saw COVID happening and everybody locking everybody up in their house, and kind of the media machinations that were required to kind of keep this to keep this foremost in people's thoughts, so that they would volunteer themselves to be locked up in their house and volunteer and coerce others, which was happening around the Western countries, where they were in Germany, they were reporting each other for if your kid was out seen playing, they would report you. Literally to the police. In England, it's crazy. I mean, the whole thing is crazy. I've kept the log. I'm an expert on. So, as we saw COVID beginning to die down, not just in terms of the actual number of reported cases, in terms of the reported deaths, we saw the cases going up, but we saw it being somewhat commensurate with the number of tests that were out there. All right. So we weren't seeing anything.
Yeah, there was one little other factor there, though. It took us 2-3 months to figure out how to sequester the people most vulnerable, to actually protect them well. So if you look in Florida, you'll see the cases going up among the younger people, under 50s, and going down for the older people, but we've learned how to actually protect. So if we had that ability at the get-go, this would have blown through. I mean, it would have been a no-brainer, but it took months.
Hold on, can I ask you something? How do you know that? I mean, you're making a pretty strong statement as though I have to accept it because it's fact. You're saying if we had known, then this would have occurred. Why do I have to accept what you say?
No, it's a learning process in terms of how to figure out how to properly protect people in rest homes, how to properly protect people who are most vulnerable. It wasn't something that you could do out of the box. The UK tried it. I mean, they said, okay, let's try to figure out a way to sequester these people, these vulnerable populations, which in the US is huge. I mean, 37% of our population was vulnerable to the virus. It wasn't something you could do as an initial strategy before a pandemic. It's something you had to learn how to do. And you know what, we made the big lie going on today, and we always end up into these big kind of delegitimizing lies, is that no politician is out there saying, okay, we're willing to accept a couple thousand people dead a day. We basically are allowing communicable cancer or heart disease on that level, but we're going to try to keep it contained within that so we can continue to have our lives. We're willing to accept that. I mean, that's the policy, that's the de facto policy, but nobody's up there saying, okay, this is what we're willing to do. And that we're still kind of giving most politicians are giving a head nod to eradicating it through measures or ignoring it, like it doesn't even exist. So it's like a weird kind of, hyper-normalization kind of thing going on here that it's very confusing to people.
Well, so, okay, but I want to go backwards because, again, I have to accept your assumptions, which I don't.
Oh, okay.
Let me go back to kind of the inception of it, because I've archived all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so your assumption is that there's so many of them that are built within that, it would be hard for me even just to do kind of the forensics on it, because the entire thing is built upon an assumption, and then it's kind of like this bubble theory of assumptions that I've got to have some agreement with.
Yeah.
Okay, so I won't do that. Okay, what I will say is let's just stick with what the actual facts are, the absolute facts, something that corresponds with true, right? Okay. So December, January, massive protests in Hong Kong. All right. For the last 2 years, 3 years, massive protests in Europe about the yellow vest, and about in Germany all the taxes, and about the Catalan separatists. In Greece about immigration, and they're still pissed off about the austerity measures, and rightfully so, and about the Deutsche Bank bailout that they were forced to do, and about kind of this EU kind of political administrative quagmires that it finds himself in with Brexit, and how to kind of properly fund different things, and at the same time how to distribute it. There's just a lot of protests going on. So what we do know for fact is that in January, in December and January, there were protests going on throughout the world.
Right.
Can we agree that that's one fact?
Oh yeah, no, I see where you're going with this. Can I I think I do. Okay. Because it's right on. You're exactly right in what you're saying. But do you mind if I just take one little break? I've been drinking coffee all morning.
Yeah, no problem. Go for it, Adam. Keep going here. Roll with it.
He's awesome. I drink about 2 gallons of water a day. So in advance of this, I couldn't drink any water last night.
We're live, Adam. We're live. Keep rolling on subject.
But it is. It's true. I'm craving water is what I'm really trying to say. So it's interesting because I'm going to wait for him to get back. But in any event, it's interesting because, again, I still have to accept the assumption, which I don't want to do. So
what is the assumption? Let me write it down.
Okay, that had we had that the information that we obtained along the way became the data sets were becoming better and better, so we could observe more in real time measures that could be taken to sequester older people and to save lives and to do this, and so the assumption that I have to agree with is first that the information was pristine, or even that the data that we were being provided was true. I mean, things have to correspond with fact, and I don't think that they ever were. So I think we first have to get an agreement on the quantitative and qualitative aspects of the information that we were provided. If we can't get agreement on that, then how can I agree with John's statement that we learned how to sequester old people to save their lives, and also how to keep young people alive? I mean, it's one has to kind of sequentially build upon the other.
Yeah, I think for me, the most important data point in all the corona stuff is just deaths, right? Like, all the other issues are what they are.
Okay, so can I stop you there? Can I stop you there?
Sure.
What do you mean deaths? I mean, deaths of what? I mean, when you say deaths, help me understand what you mean.
What I mean is deaths above and beyond what was typical in an ordinary year at that time.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. All right.
So we're drilling down, John, on
so
the
you were saying that just to recap, is that the pandemic gave an opportunity to the global elites to consolidate power and eliminate these protests. And I heartily agree. In the most cynical way possible, the pandemic allowed a consolidation of power on a global scale that we haven't seen.
No, I didn't say that.
You're not saying? Okay.
No. I mean, that's a part of what I said. I mean, first we have to also agree on what pandemic is, right? Because pandemic actually did not have an adequate definition. I mean, this happened before in 2009 with the swine flu, H1N1 swine flu. And at that time, there actually wasn't an operable definition of pandemic. Pandemic is just a term like flatten the curve or something else that's thrown into a vernacular that has no science, significant science meaning to it, but it's something that's nice for people to say. But particularly at that time where pandemic was inadequately defined. So we still haven't figured out or come to an agreement about what the pandemic was, how we were observing the pandemic, and was the information that we were given, the data, truthful? And so is the information that we have calculated and are now formulating this discussion upon sincere? Was it authentic information? So let's go back to December, January then. So December, January, there were all these riots going on. Then in January, it's actually December, but let's just state January because that's the timeline that most people have. We saw the videos on Twitter, which all of us have a life on Twitter, of people in China dropping dead, okay? Spontaneously combusting on the street, basically, from COVID. Now, I'm pretty familiar with China. I knew that wasn't possible, right? I know how videos leak out of China, and I know how they're not gonna leak out of China. And if they were to leak out of China, the difficulty that they would have finding a viewer, especially on Twitter and social media, which is very responsive to discourse power of China. So now in January, we see these videos. Now we're beginning to call something a pandemic, right? We're saying it's going to jump over a little bit. And there really wasn't a lot of deaths, right? There just wasn't a lot of morbidity attached to it. Then we heard a lot about Italy, if you guys remember Italy. So Italy was January, February. A system that was already had a lot of difficulties. And that it was operating well over capacity. It had been underfunded for a long time, and it had a very unhealthy older population. So then around March 11th, we started hearing a lot of buzz about it. Angela Merkel comes out with a speech, March 11th. March 11th, Tom Hanks. I was just discussing this with a few journalists over the last few days. March 11th, Angela Merkel comes out with a speech saying that this is Germany's World War II moment. Okay, that was the language she used. This is the war on. Okay, so I get very worried about things that are described as the war on, but that's the language she used. It's also the language Trump used, incidentally, and a lot of other politicians have used. So Tom Hanks, Angela Merkel, and the NBA all use this same on the same day. We're in all the newspapers everywhere. Okay, all about COVID. Tom Hanks had exposure to it, he said. NBA player had exposure to it. So March 11th is also, early March is also when Neil Ferguson came out with a very flawed report. Are you familiar with that, John?
Yeah, I read it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, when you say you read it, what do you mean you read it?
I read the report.
How much of the report did you read?
The whole thing.
Okay. Did you have a chance to interrogate any of that report?
Yeah, I looked at it. It was being portrayed really strangely in the media, and the things that they were pulling up and the claims that were being made were really off. Because if you really looked at it, at least from my reading of it, is that if you applied various social distancing techniques and you could achieve the same thing that you would get from a full lockdown. And what they were saying, they were taking that report and saying, hey, this is a reason why you shouldn't use these techniques and that we need a lockdown, which was exactly opposite of what the report actually said. So I was, it was very disturbing. I mean, one thing I found in looking at all these epidemiological models and hearing how these epidemiologists think and the assumptions they make is that, a lot of these assumptions are really flawed, and they were the models are pretty weak, and it's taken them way too long to update them. But you still can tease information out of them if you understand where the flaws are.
Okay, so can I interrupt you there?
Yeah.
When you say you can tease information, well, first, I mean, I'm not good at pronouncing these things. I have a little bit of a list. So epidemiologist or whatever they are.
Epidemiologist, yeah, yeah, got it.
I'm not even going to try. It's embarrassing. So whatever you just said, what's their academic background? I mean, what's required? What type of a degree is that?
Usually, it's a master's or a PhD.
In
so
what?
It's
but in what?
Epidemiology. Yeah,
Okay.
It's a study of infectious diseases and on a population scale.
Are you sure of that? Are you sure of that?
No, my sister's an epidemiologist.
Okay, she's an but are you sure that that's a qualification required of one?
Well, actually, the interesting thing is that we saw a lot of people writing papers and making pronouncements on this that came from a variety of different backgrounds. So we see physicists, we see statisticians, we see people who are involved in general health. I mean, the volume of data being produced, and the volume of studies, and the volume of information, in a large part, drowned out a lot of what you get from the people who are professionals at this.
Okay, but
the professional models, so they were built on assumptions like, here's a good example. That if you have voluntary social distancing requirements and recommendations, that only 10% of the population would follow.
But hold on, John, we got to go backwards.
It didn't happen.
But we haven't agreed on what an whatever that is.
Epidemiologist is.
Okay, yeah. And you have an advantage on me because your sister is one, so you're just used to saying it around the dinner table. I've said it 5 times in my life. Okay, I'd have to stay at home and practice in front of a mirror to be able to say the thing. So, but what is the academic requirements to be an I mean, can you go out there tomorrow and say that you are one of those? Can you do that? Why not?
There's a degree requirement. You get a degree in epidemiology.
Are you sure of that?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're sure that in order to do that, I don't need some other type of, I can't just self-proclaim if I have an academic background in, let's say, computer modeling, data sets.
No, that's not stopping people from actually making pronouncements and doing studies and claiming insight into the pandemic. I mean, we have very, very few examples of pandemics at this scale that really let people dive into building models for it. And this one was unique. And
okay, so hold on. Neil Ferguson, was he, by the definition that you feel is kind of the threshold, right? Was he, perhaps a degree, an advanced degree in virology or infectiology? Was he any of those? I don't know.
I mean, it was a model. It was a model that you could either take the assumptions as valuable or you're not. I mean,
but you want me to agree? Because this is an important point. Because when we're talking about this, is really my question to you is: you want me to agree with the deaths, that how successful we've been sequestering or not sequestering, or what we've learned along the way. But now, even just going to the beginning of this, we're looking at a report from a person who, by the rigid definition that you would like, right, the most authoritative one, which is some type of a degree in virology or infectiology. He is none of those things. That's not what he is. That's not what he is. I mean, that's not what he is. So I don't want to agree to anybody's further argument. I think it's a dangerous thing. I mean, I want to agree because I'm an agreeable type of guy, but I fear being in agreement with something that originated with a report that was not from an authoritative source that was presented as such. And initially, Angela Merkel, which, I mean, you obviously picked up on, she said that something like 200 million Americans were going to get infected, and there would be a 2.2 million possible people dying of COVID.
Well, I don't think that actually okay. In general, we have a terrible way of communicating information in this country, and the bureaucracies, the health bureaucracy, proved totally incompetent in terms of coordinating their behavior, planning in this instance, and as well as the financial bureaucracy did in the financial crisis, and the foreign policy and military communities totally flubbed the Iraq War and the response to it, 9/11. And we're seeing that again and again, that these bureaucracies that we've built, that we've invested in, that all these millions of people that we've paid incredible amounts of money to and gave them respect to, can't generate high quality decision making anymore. And it's resulting in this environment. And we see projections being purposely hyped. We see people saying, like the CDC, it's saying that masks don't work.
Okay, but John,
back in March, because it is the noble lie to say, right, is that they're misleading people because they didn't want them going out and buying masks. I mean, that's just incredibly stupid thing. I mean, there's 100 years of infection control in hospitals that's built on. It's common sense.
But now it's interesting because Neil Ferguson, okay,
right,
was part of the research team that led to the culling of tens of millions of animals during the hoof and mouth crisis, where Britain just destroyed their economy by killing all their livestock. And it turns out that the data was incredibly wrong. Okay, just incredibly wrong that they didn't need to kill him. Neil Ferguson.
Again, bureaucracy messed up, right?
Yeah, Adam, I'm gonna step in for just 1 second. I think that we're all in agreement that a million people opined on this subject. There were tech people, statisticians, epidemiologists, randos, Twitter personalities, guys with a Medium account that wrote an article that got 50 million views and seemed to have changed the whole tone and conversation.
Right.
It was like titled like "Why We Have to Do Something Like Right Now," and it just went everywhere. I think we can also agree that the Neil Ferguson report was sliced and diced in ways that were opportunistic for people. I think we can also agree that Neil Ferguson has work in the past is questionable. I think we can also agree that the Imperial College, they're also in the business of doing climate science modeling, and we know how that's going as well too. So I think that if we want to establish the fact that the data is unreliable and that our professionals and credentialed folks are also unreliable, I think that we're all in agreement there. I think the next question is who took advantage of this unreliable data, who sliced it in which direction, and to go which way and why. I think that's where we're headed. Is that not right, Adam?
Yeah, so, and I apologize, and I hope that wasn't antagonistic. It's a subject that I'm actively like, yeah. But, and you're awesome, John. You know I'm a huge fan of yours.